Hello, Bucs fans, and welcome to an instant reaction episode of Hear the Cannons. I am Colin Hollboom, writer for BucsGameday, which is Sports Illustrated's only website dedicated specifically to covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I am joined from Raymond James Stadium by one of my colleagues and a fellow writer over at BucsGameday, and that, of course, is Caleb Skinner. If you are joining us for the first time, please make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter at BucsGameday. And if you're feeling generous, feel free to follow Caleb and I as well, as you see our handles on the screen right now. So exciting day for the Bucs. I mean, I don't know if they got there in the way many of us envisioned. It was not the prettiest game, and there were plenty of issues. However, when it's all said and done, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are atop the NFC South. They have a game up on the Atlanta Falcons. Kind of crazy when you consider how things shook out when those two teams met up both times this year. The Falcons, of course, winning both of those in demoralizing fashion for the Bucs. But after a 28-13 victory over the Raiders, and with the Falcons losing 42-21, they got handled by Darnold and the Vikings in Minnesota, and the Bucs are atop the NFC South. Caleb was live in the press box at Raymond James Stadium. Caleb, overall, what's your biggest takeaway from the game, man? Just give us your overall impressions. Let us know how it was down there.
Yeah, it wasn't clean by any means. You touched on that, Colin. I think my biggest takeaway is that I don't know if there really is much of a takeaway, to be honest with you. It wasn't necessarily, and nothing really popped. I think the biggest takeaway, I guess, is going to be continuous injuries. The injuries continue to pile up for the Buccaneers. You had Bucky Irving exit the game with a back injury. Had other guys going down as well. We had to play Vi Jones today, starting linebacker, and Antoine Winfield Jr. going down as well, leaving the game. So the injuries just continue to pile up for the Buccaneers. Luckily today, you got the Raiders. Kayvon Merriweather had a pretty decent game, sliding in there in the back end at safety. But that's the biggest thing here for the final stretch of the season. The Buccaneers are really, really thin on the defensive side of the ball. The good thing here, though, is we got to see Rachaad White perhaps have one of his better games of the season. He started off really hot today, which was good to see. Kind of tampered down there in the second half, but he had a good game overall, and it was good to see him take advantage of his opportunities with Bucky Irving being out. So overall, the biggest thing here is got to be the injuries, and then the other thing too is what is going on with Baker Mayfield. What is going on there? Another 3 turnover game where he threw 2 interceptions and then fumbled another ball. So we got to get that corrected. He left points on the board again. Could have gotten 3 points right before halftime. Didn't happen. So it's unfortunate, but those mistakes need to be corrected if the Buccaneers want to maintain their position at the top of the NFC South now with the Atlanta Falcons falling to the Minnesota Vikings today.
Yeah, and I mean, the box score, Baker was 18 for 29, almost 300 yards. He had 295 through the air, 3 passing touchdowns, only 12 yards rushing. But the real problem, and of course, the 2 picks, as you mentioned, also 4 sacks. And I think you got to rewatch the tape to really understand, but it sure felt like that was a result several times of him getting a lack of pocket poise, ultimately, is the best way to describe it. Happy feet, too scrambly in the pocket, felt like he was indecisive. He wasn't just letting it rip. And yeah, that's a concern, especially coming off his performance last week in Carolina. These are 2 inferior opponents. These should be wins, right? So it's hard to get too high after watching what we just watched. I mean, Bucs offense, led by Liam Cohen and Baker Mayfield, come out fantastic. They look great first quarter, which has been really nice for Bucs fans who have just been tormented with slow starts over the past few years. But quarters 2 and 3 was just atrocious. You let the Raiders walk back into the game without even involving Brock Bowers. I mean, he had 1 catch, so obviously they did a pretty good job there. But you got Aiden O'Connell. He goes out. It was just a real struggle, and I think a lot of that has to fall on the shoulders of the quarterback. You talked about it. Baker needs to be more consistent. He needs to be able to step back and let it rip right away. Quick reads, deliver the pass. However, on the broadcast, and I'm not sure if you were aware of this, they were it looks like he might be dealing with a toe injury. He had it heavily taped. I'm not sure if he's going to talk about that after the game. I'm sure he'll be asked about it. But he could be fighting through some injury. Not to make an excuse for him. He's got to play better. He's obviously well enough to stand on his 2 feet, and he still threw for 3 touchdowns. So I think it's more up here than down there for Baker. Jalen McMillan, 2 touchdowns today, 4 receptions, 59 yards. That's a guy, Caleb, we were really high on. Everyone around Tampa was high on based off of his first ever training camp and how he was showing out before the season started. Hasn't gone the way that many of us expected, but, better late than never. What were your impressions of McMillan today?
It's fantastic. I think this is, he scored 2 touchdowns today, so 3 on the year. I think going back to week 1 against the Commanders is the last time that we saw Jalen McMillan in the end zone. So good for him to, kind of get off that schneid of not having much going for him. He's getting the opportunities, right, but he hasn't been able to take advantage of them quite yet. And today it just worked out for him. On that second touchdown, it was a beautifully called play by Liam Cohen to be able to get him in open space. There was nobody there. One defender went flying by him, and then it was, game, set, match from there. And he just walked into the end zone. It's great to see, you can kind of get in your head as a young wide receiver, right? If you're not getting the ball, trying to learn an offense, still acclimating yourself to the speed of the game or whatever it may be. And, you finally find your footing. So it's great to see, Jalen start to take these steps into becoming who he's supposed to be as a player. And it should only benefit the Buccaneers, as the season continues, especially with Chris Godwin being down. Also, great game from Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard just making plays when he needs to make plays, doing what he's supposed to do. So the 2, wide receivers outside of Mike Evans are the ones that really stepped up today, and the Buccaneers needed it because it's a little bit closer than the score should have, score says at the end of the game because of those late touchdowns. So I was really happy with Jalen, and I'm hopeful that he continues this streak and he keeps building upon what he did today.
Yeah, and I want to highlight a couple of other guys who I think played well before we go over to any other negatives. And first off, Levante David started off this game really well. He finished with 6 total tackles, unless he got one up there before I tallied that. A sack, a fumble recovery. I mean, just classic Levante David, having to hold it down without a consistent partner as playing that inside linebacker position alongside him. You saw Vi Jones struggle a little bit today at points, I thought, but Levante was doing his thing. And then Zion McCollum quietly had a nice game. He almost had a pick. He had that one overturned. 6 tackles, though, and you didn't see him. When you're not noticing the corner, they're probably doing a good job, similar to an O-lineman, and I thought he did do a good job. And then you mentioned Kayvon Merriweather, man. I thought he stepped up. This guy was on the Detroit Lions practice squad the last 2 weeks. Of course, he spent the majority of the last 2 years, or year and a half anyway, with Tampa Bay, undrafted free agent rookie signing out of Iowa last year. And he played really well, man. He had a couple big hits in that second half. He almost had a pick that I think he should have had, but either way, he almost made the play. And we're not criticizing Zion McCollum for doing the same, so I'm going to give him a pass there. But Tyke Smith did get a pick, and it was nice to see him back in the lineup, back playing. But like Caleb, what can the Bucs even roster a competent defense with these injuries? Do we have to investigate the training staff? Is this just bad luck? Dude, what is going on with for Antoine Winfield Jr.? First off, do we have to start questioning his durability as a player? Because he missed the whole month of September. He went out in that Commanders game. He's got a history of injuries. Obviously, he was really healthy in a contract year last year. And I, just like everyone else, loves Antoine Winfield Jr. But dude, do we have serious durability concerns here? Could there potentially be buyer's remorse from Jason Light?
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily just with Antoine, right? It's happening weekly at this point. Every single Friday, when that injury report comes out on Friday, there's a new body on there. There's somebody else that is either questionable or doubtful to play the game, and that happened this week again. JJ Russell on Friday. What is going on with that? And then in the game, Antoine being knocked out, he's hobbling off the field. So not really sure. I mean, you got to really put into question what is going on in the strength and conditioning room and what is going on in these Friday practices for these guys to get hurt. So it does become a concern because as we see, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense hasn't been good at all this season. And a large portion of that is due to the fact that there have been injuries at all levels of the defense to the point where you're filling in with guys that you didn't even expect to possibly even see the field this season, and you're having to go dig and grab guys from a Detroit practice squad. Luckily for the Buccaneers, Kayvon Merriweather knows Todd Bowles' defense and was able to step in and made big plays today, almost coming down with that interception. So eye on 2. Speaking of which, how two interceptions that could have been interceptions called back against the Buccaneers, more so probably with the Zion one where it barely might have graze the grass, but incredible stuff. It's like what is going on? But getting Tyke Smith back was huge. It's good to see him, starting to round out and get a little bit healthier than where he was, because he's been dealing with, the concussion, and then I can't think. I think he injured his hamstring or something as well, like
Yeah.
a week or two ago. So he's been dealing with that. So good to see him get in there. Good to see him make some plays. And I think overall, it comes into concern and question about what is happening, right? Like, what is going on the defensive side of the ball? Offensive side of the ball, you're not seeing it as much, but we obviously saw the situation with Mike Evans. Shouldn't have been out there. Ended up getting hurt worse. Godwin getting hurt. You can't do anything about that one. But now Bucky is hurt, and it's just, what do you do? What can you do to better protect these guys and not let them get, hurt? Or what are you doing on Fridays for them to be able to get hurt? Usually you should be able to walk through and call it a day, but I get that's on Saturday sometimes as well. So it's concerning, but I do want to give the defense props today, because they did hold, Brock Bowers in check, and that's a major kudos to them for being able to stop him. Even though he was going to get his, he didn't necessarily even get his today. So you knew that was going to be their focal point of their offense. So they did a great job of maintaining him, keeping him under wraps for the majority of the game. And just a quick little, shout out and a prayer sending to Aiden O'Connell for his injury that happened. It's unfortunate. Possibly probably could have been called a late hit on Kalijah Cansey there. Fortunately for the Bucs, it was not, and unfortunately for the Raiders, Aiden O'Connell is now out. So they're down to Desmond Ridder probably for the rest of the season, with Gardner Minshew having that collarbone injury that's placed him on the IR, and then this injury as well for Aiden O'Connell. So the Raiders aren't looking too great right now, but the Buccaneers came in with a big victory, and it's going to be interesting to see where they decide to go on the defensive side of the ball, and if they can get somewhat healthy at some point, it would be a huge win for them.
Yeah, it sure would. And in regards to the injury issues you mentioned, like Mike Evans leaving him out there in that Ravens game earlier in the year, he went ahead and got hurt and was on the shelf for several weeks. At least with Bucky Irving, I mean, it took him a while to announce it that he'd be out, but at least they kept him on the sidelines, right? You got two competent backs, and even Sean Tucker was really productive today. Just a couple of runs, but he was well over 50 yards in those 3 runs. So that was awesome. One area that I thought was noticeable compared to what we've seen recently from this team was the offensive line play. It did not feel like they were handling the opponents as I expected them to. The Raiders doubled the Bucs production in sacks. So it kind of goes twofold, because also the Bucs are just not generating enough of a pass rush, and that continued today against the Raiders offensive line. So I feel like the Bucs lost the trench battle today. And if you weren't playing the Raiders, you probably wouldn't have won the game losing the trench battle, but they did. So I want to get your thoughts on that, whether you want to focus on the defensive side or the offensive side. You can have at it. Before, though, I pass you the mic, I just want to remind everyone, if you're watching us on YouTube and you got questions, you want to shoot mine or Caleb's way, please go ahead, get those questions in the comments. We would love to address them before we get out of here. We only got Caleb for so long, but that being said, Caleb, talk to us about the trench play. Am I right that the Bucs lost on both sides of the ball today?
Yeah, it wasn't good by any means. It's we've kind of seen that over the past couple of weeks, where the trenches aren't really doing what they need to do. Offensive line is having penalties. Happened again today. Max Crosby, even though he didn't really necessarily make those huge plays, was able to get pressure and help everybody else along on that defensive line. And then switching sides, the Buccaneers not really getting after the quarterback at all unless they were blitzing. So I don't think it's a huge cause for concern, because we kind of know that's what it's going to be, right? What you do want to pay attention to is, why is the offensive line not able to hold up like they have been for the first part of the season? They're one of the top units in the league, for majority of the season, and just kind of dropping the ball a little bit. Maybe a little bit of that still with Tristan trying to come back and get 100% healthy. Barton had a better game than he had last week, and Gadecki had a penalty, and Bredesen had a penalty today. So it's not super bad, but it can be a cause for a little bit of concern. Although, the Raiders are a decent team at creating pressures, obviously with the help of Max Crosby, but you're going to face some better defensive lines possibly along the rest of the way, especially when you're going up against a team like the Chargers, who really rely on their defense and running the ball. So you are going to have to, make sure that those guys are ready to go and solidified, and make sure that they understand the importance of what is going on. So There's a lot of games left before the end of the season, but they should be able to hold it down, and I think that'll be the case. I think they'll get right back on track, and if the defense can somehow figure out how to create more pressures, that can only benefit the Buccaneers later down the road too, because you're going to need them. You're going to need these guys to get out the quarterback, especially if you maintain this spot at top of the NFC South and you make the playoffs. You are going to need to have everything buttoned up and lined up and ready to go in the playoffs. We saw it last year; they were able to come out and do it. So hopefully they can do it again and finish strong here.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, man, the only other thing I really want to hit on that I think is potentially a pretty significant development is head coach Todd Bowles' willingness to go for it on 4th and short outside of the red zone. He did it last week at Carolina, and he did it today multiple times. I mean, are we seeing a change in the overall philosophy from this team's head coach as a game manager? And if so, could that save his job?
You think he's listening to everybody, right? You think he's finally listening to us media pundits about his coaching and what's going on, and he's making those play calls, which is great to see. No more booing. The crowd's not booing him anymore for his decision making to go for it on 4th down. So it's really great to see that Todd Bowles is adjusting on the fly on his own, and that was something that I think a few weeks ago we had talked about anyways. Where are the adjustments being made? Where is this coming from? And now it seems like he is, and it's benefiting the Buccaneers, and that's why we've ripped off 3 straight wins and why they have a strong chance to finish strong. And if Todd Bowles keeps doing what he's doing, then there's no reason for him to be considered on that hot seat anymore, if you will.
Yeah, man, you said it. Well, Caleb, really appreciate you finding a way to join us here for this instant reaction episode. You're very generous with your time, and I hope you enjoyed covering the game for Bucs Game Day, because we are always well represented, especially when those games are played at Raymond James Stadium. And thankfully, the Buccaneers got a win, and they are literally in control atop the NFC South. Again, as I said off the top, hard to believe with how they've played within the division. But this is the NFL. It's a crazy league, and crazy things happen. So that being said, folks, make sure you tune in on Wednesday, where we'll be teeing up next weekend's huge game against the LA Chargers. That'll be at SoFi. And until next weekend, at least, the Bucs are going to remain in that number 1 seed, going for a 4th consecutive season as NFC South Division champions. Make sure you're checking out BucsGameday.com every day. We got you covered. Tons of content. I think we got probably 7 or 8 pieces out since that game kicked off today. So make sure that's your everyday stop for Buccaneers content. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, and follow us on Twitter at BucsGameday as well. Thanks everyone for joining us, and until next time, go Bucs.